Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to recommend a book to you guys. Now, I do have a playlist of book recommendations. Um, there's always a reason I recommend certain books. Some of them have, are resources for chronic illness. So the most recent book reviews that I did were great for people that are trying to manage a chronic illness. But every now and then I will recommend a book that has like nothing to do with chronic illness, but for me has sort of helped me cope with my chronic illness, and I'll explain to you why. Um, so I think previously I had recommended, and you'll probably see it in the playlist of book recommendations. There was a book called "Give Us This Day," and it's a difficult read. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's hard to read because it's about a prisoner of war and all of the things that he went through um, before finally being free. And it's an incredible book. It's one of those books that will never leave my brain ever. I mean, you read it and it's unimaginable what people can survive. And this book that I'm going to recommend to you guys today is quite similar, very very similar in content. It's called The Happiest Man on Earth, and it is the story of a Holocaust survivor. His name was Eddie Jaku. He's a real man, and it's just, and I for those of you that really can't deal with stuff with very difficult, just kind of graphic um, types of content, it's probably not the book for you. But for me, when I read stories like this, sort of the human will to live, and just how people will find a reason to keep going. They will find the strength to continue to survive, and somehow they do. And to me, that it's just incredibly, it's impressive, it's inspiring, but it's also, there's just something else. There's something that moves me when I read stories like that. And this is definitely one of those stories. So obviously, it takes place during the Holocaust. He was in, I think, a few different concentration camps before he eventually ended up at Auschwitz, which, if you know anything about the Holocaust, Auschwitz is probably the most notorious and the most well-known concentration camp because of the high number of victims. And so he ended up there eventually. He was quite young. I think he was 18 years old when he was picked up by I think they're called the Gestapo, the police, and taken to a concentration camp. And the worst part about it was that it was literally chance. It was totally by chance. He was already living somewhere else. I think he was going to college and doing like an apprenticeship under a different name. So he was actually safe. He was, I think, in another country. He was safe. He was doing his apprenticeship. He was going to school, and he was under a different name. He was under like a German name, so that people couldn't identify that he was Jewish. And his life was, his life was pretty set. And what happened was he went back home without knowing. I mean, they knew obviously what was going on at the time, and they knew that there was, they had heard about these camps. But for whatever reason, I think it was his parents' anniversary. It's like his parents' wedding anniversary. I think it was like their 20th wedding anniversary, something like that. And so he had the idea of going back. I think he had already been gone had been away from his family for a few years, because he talked about feeling homesick, missing his parents, and so I guess he thought that, for their anniversary would be a great idea to go back and visit them. And when he got to their house, it was empty except for their dog. So he didn't know that his parents had actually gone into hiding, because obviously at this point, the police were coming around and rounding up everybody that they believed to be Jewish. And he didn't know because he was safe. He was somewhere else. He was safe. He was focused on his education and his apprenticeship and learning and all of that. And so I guess, I don't know, I guess it just like didn't click or something. And that was what, how he ended up getting caught and taken to a concentration camp. So it was literally chance that this happened. Had he not gone back home, which I think he had been told, like not to come back home. His parents, did this for his safety. It hurt him a lot because he loved his parents and they had such a great relationship. Um, and and he also talks about that. He talks about the love that he had for his parents, the things that his parents taught him. And for me, that always, it moves me, but you can see why some people have developed the will to live, because they had this foundation that their parents had given them since they were children. They'd given them beautiful memories, even if only for a few short years. They gave him a solid foundation. And when you read this book, you can really see that his father and his mother gave him a very grounded, healthy perspective, to see the world in. So, and that's why he went back to see his parents, because he loved them so much, and he was like, this would be a great opportunity for all of us to get together. So the story, kind of starts there. I also like the fact that this is sort of I feel like it's kind of very realistic, because I think a lot of times the way that we depict the Holocaust, whether it's in movies or in books, is almost like they just put them in there and then that was it. There was a lot going on. He was moved around a lot, because if you were of some use to, the Nazis or, your superiors, if you were of some use to them, if you had some kind of knowledge or some kind of skill, they would use you for that, right? They would use you to make like weapons or tools or whatever they needed for the ongoing war, because it was a war at the same time, right? So he had a lot of skills. I think he was like an engineer or something like that. And so he was moved around a lot. And he even like left the concentration camp for a while and then reunited with his parents for a little bit. So it's almost this story, it really tugs at you, because you get hopeful for him that he's finally left, and then he gets caught again, or he tries to escape and then he gets caught again, but he's not killed, because a lot of times when someone would try to escape or run away from a concentration camp, they would get caught and they were automatically killed. And he didn't. There were times when he was able to sneak back in to a camp because he had left, but his plan did not work out well. So he was able to sneak back in because he knew that was his only way to survive, is to actually be in the concentration camp and not get caught outside trying to leave. So there's a lot of, it's a roller coaster of emotions. It's hard, because he does go into detail about what they would do to them, the things that they would do, the things that they would have to endure in order to survive. And even after they were liberated, what happened to their bodies, because you don't just bounce back from that kind of thing. These types of stories move me a lot because, and I speak for myself, but I know that there are a lot of other people in the chronic illness community that would probably agree with me. There are days that we get to where we've had it. We've had it with being sick. We've had it with not feeling well. We've had it with struggling to manage our health and, all the things that we have to do every single day, the monotony of caring for ourselves, not being able to go out anywhere, not being able to hang out with friends or to do things with our families. And I'm not trying to compare that to the Holocaust whatsoever. When I read these types of stories, I think to myself, if that person survived that, I have nothing to complain about. And I know that there are people that are not going to like, that frame of thinking, and it does get annoying when people say, like, you should be grateful. But these stories sort of help me to put things into perspective. I get to sleep on a bed at night. I'm not sleeping on a floor naked in the dead of winter. You know what I mean? I get to sleep as much as I want because I don't even work. I don't get up and go to a job. So I can stay in bed in the morning, right? I have clothes, I have food. Granted, I can't eat everything, but I can still eat. Um, there are, you start to see these trials that these people have been through. And the other book is very similar, the one called Give Us This Day, where they go through so much, and for whatever reason, and they lose everyone that they love. They lose family, they lose friends, and they somehow find the will to keep going. And Eddie talks about that. Eddie, I think that's one of the things that many of us ask ourselves when we see stories like this, particularly with the Holocaust. He talks about how a lot of people ended their lives. A lot of the prisoners ended their lives on their own because they couldn't deal with it anymore, and they preferred to end their lives and not allow the Nazis to do it. It was almost like a sense of power over their own self, to take that pleasure away from these sort of sadistic, cruel monsters, and to say, okay, well, I'm going to do it myself. That way you can't do it. That way you can't get the satisfaction of hurting me or ending my life. And so he talks about what kept him going. And one of the things that he does touch on is a friendship. He had a really good friend. I forgot what his name was. He has a really good friend that he says, this guy was my best friend. He was like a brother to me. He was everything. And just the fact that we were in the same camp together, and I guess they were kept in the same area together. He said that can make all the difference. He said one good friend can make all the difference. He said, and he speaks about love, not just romantic love, not just the love for your family, but the love for a friend. And he said that love is also something that can keep you going, and that can get you through to the next day. He also talks about small gestures that, he said that even though there are some very, very horrible people in this world, so there are also some people who are very kind, and he said all you need is a little bit of that kindness to keep you going. And there was one story that he told where he was working. He had, because of his skills, they put him to do a job, I think making tools or something. And I think his boss or something at that job was someone that knew his dad or something, prior to all of that. And that's the interesting part too, is that all of these people, they kind of knew a lot of these people, that had suddenly become very evil and very, they knew these people. These were their neighbors. These were the people that they would see in their town. So it was kind of a small world. And this gentleman, I think, knew his father, and he said that he could not, that the guy just looked at him and he was like, "Are you the son of so-and-so?" And he was like, "Yeah, I am." And the man was conflicted because he knew he had a job to do, right? He wasn't Jewish, he was German, and that his job was to, oversee him and be his boss and punish him if he stepped out of line. But he couldn't wrap his head around how this was the son of one of his friends. I think they were friends or they were coworkers or something, but it was someone that he knew and someone that he liked. It wasn't someone that, he had any problem with. And so to him, it was just like, it was a conflict, for this man, to be doing this job and hurt someone that he cared about. So what he did was he would give him extra food. So he would give Eddie extra food. He would hide it inside the machine that he was working on. And he told him, he said, "I'm going to give you some extra food, and I'm going to hide it here, but if you can't eat it all," he says, "you can't take it back with you. You can't take it back to wherever you're staying. You can't share it with anybody, and if you can't eat it all, you have to throw away whatever's left." And you can only imagine the torture, because there are people that are, I mean, they were being starved. Everybody was being starved in the camps. And he couldn't eat all the food, because when you are in such a state of starvation where you're eating very, very little and surviving off of very little, you can no longer digest other types of food, particularly richer foods. And he describes that in the book. And of course, these are things that we don't, or that we often overlook, because we don't know anybody that's being starved to death, you know. And these are things that are important um, for us to hear about and to learn about. And so that was almost like, you know, he was able to get a little bit of extra food in his system, but at the same time having to throw away food that he couldn't eat, food that he couldn't share with, you know, his bunk mates or whoever he was living with, that were also suffering and becoming very, very sick. So there's that conflict within himself, but also the kindness of this man that had known his father. And he said all it takes is just something small like that to keep you going. You know, he said there are good people in this world, even under these horrible circumstances. There are good people, and there are good things that are still happening, and you just have to sort of, I guess, focus on that. So, you know, when I read books like this, it really, it's inspiring, but it's also, like I said, it puts things into perspective. When I have a day when I think to myself, like, I can't do this anymore, um, I can't go on like this, I don't want to try anymore, I don't want to try anything else, I don't want to keep going, I don't want to spend any more money, I don't want to, you know. And then I read books like that, it kind of gives me that extra push, like, he survived this. By the way, he lived to be 100 years old. Keep in mind, he was in the concentration camps when he was like 18. He lived to be 100 years old. That's another thing that I was totally amazed at. So he got married, he had kids, he got to see not only his kids, but his grandkids and his great-grandkids. So it's an amazing, amazing story. He actually died just a few years ago, so he was still alive up until a few years ago. He has a TED Talk as well that you can see here on YouTube. Just type in Eddie Jaku, Jaku, and his TED Talk comes up, because this book is based on the TED Talk that he gave. But when I see that, you know, and let's put it into a physical, you know, perspective, and he does talk about that, the things that the human body can endure, the things that the human body can resist and continue to go on for that long. I mean, you're looking at someone who had severe malnutrition, you know, he came out of the concentration camps and still continued to have problems, because you don't bounce back from that right away. You know, and just read the book. I don't want to keep giving away all these different parts. You got to read the book to see what happens afterwards. But when I look at stuff like that, I think to myself, the human body can really take a beating, and it can really just, and it can survive. It can truly survive. And I think to myself, you know, he's gone through so much worse. And, you know, he talks about that. He says, you know, if you're feeling bad and if you're, you know, not doing well, he said, you know, think of your friend Eddie. He said, and, you know, and do this for me, you know, keep going. And that was kind of, I mean, also too, you know, what are the odds that I discovered this book? You know, there was somebody on YouTube that recommended it, and I was like, okay, I'll read it. And I thought to myself, what perfect timing, because I'm kind of at a point where I think to myself, like, I'm tired. I don't want to go through more medical treatment. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted. I can't, you know, I'm tired of spending money. I'm tired of wasting my time. I'm just exhausted. And then you read a book like this and he says, do it for your friend Eddie. You know, just get through one more day. Do it for your friend Eddie. And he has lived by his own philosophy. He saved 2 young women, also Holocaust survivors, that that had survived. They had survived, and they just couldn't find any meaning in their life anymore. And he saved them. And he told them, do it for your friend Eddie. He said, I'm going to make sure that you're okay, that nothing happens to you, you're going to have a place to live, and I want you guys to move on and have a good life. And they did. So he not only practices what he preaches himself, but he tries to get other people to to live the lessons that he's learned as well. And so I read that book and I thought to myself, well, if this is my sign to just keep at it, then that's what I got to do. But it's a hard book to get through. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a very difficult book to digest all of the things that happen, because he does go into detail, but it really is it's a testament to the human spirit, to be completely honest. There are people that simply have a level of resilience that that is unheard of, and he's one of those people. And look, I mean, his life, he lived an extremely long life, and an extremely full life. So I highly recommend the book. You could get the audiobook. I got mine through the Hoopla app, which is for LA County libraries. And I got to listen to it for free, and it's an incredible book. It's one that I would like to add to my collection. It's definitely a good one. And if you haven't read Give Us This Day, it's very similar. It's graphic. It's really hard to get through, but it gives you that same perspective of what people can endure and then continue on with life afterwards. So it's a really good book, you guys. I highly recommend it. He does have a cheerful presence. He's not someone that's going to sort of bring you down, even though the subject matter is heavy. He's not. It doesn't make you feel so heavy and weighed down. It actually makes you feel lighter and more hopeful in the end. So I highly recommend it. And yeah, so thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.